All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Maroney. I'm going to start the CLE by reading from a script that was prepared. I hope and promise that it's the most boring part of your next hour. This is a joint effort by the Washington Defense Trial Lawyers and the Corporate Counsel section of the WSBA. My name is John Maroney, and I'll be the MC, and I'm joined by two fantastic speakers. As for me, I'm a trial lawyer turned in-house counsel. I was a partner at a large law firm in Seattle called Williams, Kastner & Gibbs. I tried cases to verdict before going in-house and currently work as a director on the legal team at Holland America Group, which services several cruise brands. I'm predominantly an employment lawyer advising human resources and managing outside counsel on all employment claims and litigation. And I also manage outside counsel on a wide range of other litigation. I'm on the executive board of the Washington Defense Trial Lawyers. I have a 5-month-old who was born at the end of March, so you might hear her cooing or scream crying in the background. And I have a 5-year-old who might barge in and steal one of his infinite toys in this playroom. With me today is Derek Bishop. Derek is a partner in the employment practice group at Gordon Reese Scully Mann-Sukani. He helps clients across the nation with complex employment matters. He regularly counsels employers on workplace issues, including disability accommodation, wage and hour issues, and other employment matters. When necessary, he defends employers against employment claims, including wage and hour violations, brought by either individual employees or on behalf of a class of employees. Derek also chairs the Employment Law Committee for the Washington Defense Trial Lawyers. Also with us is Elaine Pasqua. Elaine joined TrueBlue in 2016. TrueBlue is a leading provider of specialized workforce solutions for staffing, on-site workforce management, and recruitment process outsourcing services through its several subsidiaries. TrueBlue currently puts more than 840,000 people to work each year and partners with 130,000 companies around the world. Elaine manages TrueBlue's employment legal team. She is also responsible for responding to all OSHA-related matters on behalf of the company. Prior to joining TrueBlue, Elaine was a civil trial attorney for Zurich North America. Elaine is currently on the executive committee of the WSBA Corporate Counsel section, founding emeritus board member and past president of the Filipino Lawyers of Washington, and the Northwest Regional Governor for the National Asian Pacific American Bar Association. As I said at the outset, this is a co-hosted event by the WDTL and the Corporate Counsel section of the WSBA. For our WDTL members, the Corporate Counsel section is open to anyone and is a good addition to supplement your WDTL membership. At WDTL, you get to be a better defense lawyer, but with the Corporate Counsel section, you can network with corporate lawyers and expand your practice. And for those in the Corporate Counsel section, the WDTL offers free membership to in-house lawyers to supplement your Corporate Counsel membership. This benefits our membership because many of our members rely on corporate lawyers like yourselves to sustain a client base, and your membership in our section could pave the way for a new attorney-client relationship. And you benefit from our free membership by gaining access to unlimited CLEs and broaden your horizon with outside counsel. As a fellow in-house lawyer, I can attest that sometimes it's difficult to find an outside lawyer with whom you connect. And so we encourage you to join the WDTL at no charge, and you might be able to network and find different counsel. A couple of things before we begin. First, we will be taking questions throughout the CLE today. If you have a question, use the Q&A function, not the chat function. We will be monitoring the questions and we'll do our best to raise the questions at appropriate times during the presentation. If we do not get to your question, Derek has promised that he will personally respond to you within the next 24 to 48 hours. Second, this CLE has been approved for CLE credit and is being recorded. The recording will be available after today's session. You can access the CLE later by visiting the WDTL website. And finally, the CLE is part of a 2-part series. The next presentation will be 2 weeks from today, and we'll focus on managing workers who are working from home. Be sure to register for that CLE, which has also been approved for CLE credit and will require a separate registration. So with that, I will turn it over to Derek and Elaine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like John said, my name is Derek Bishop. I'm a partner at the law firm of Gordon Reese Scully Mann-Sukani. And you know, it's my pleasure to be here today to talk with you guys about this incredible virus and the legal reactions to it. I did want to say really, this has been unprecedented in my career, where we have a situation like this. I mean, obviously, it's unprecedented, but it's legally unprecedented in that you have regulations and rules from federal, state, as well as local municipalities, all of which could be, a little bit different, and then different rules for different industries as well. So what we're here, we have 50 minutes with you, and we are going to do our best to move through things rapidly, but we're not going to be able to address every specific industry and every specific area. It's really just intended to give a good general overview, highlight the issues that are there, and then if you have any further questions, or if you have a specific question either as to your jurisdiction or your industry, feel free to reach out to me. Like John said, I will do my best to provide whatever information I can to help do that. So with that said, let's get started here, and I will bring up the information for you. Okay, so just real quick about Gordon & Reese. We're a national law firm. I think the last time I checked, we were in AmLaw 96 or so. We have offices in all 50 states. So, to the extent you have needs anywhere, we should be able to help you out if you have any questions. What we don't know is we want to know a little bit more about you guys. And so we've created some poll questions, and I'm hoping we can put poll number 1 up. There it is. And basically we just want to know where you guys are looking for advice. Is it only in Washington? Are you nationwide? Is it international? So if we can leave that open for just another few seconds, we'll get that closed, and then we can move to the next question. It's always weird with these kind of things, especially remotely, when we can't see any of you guys, and how intently you're listening. But I also can't see, a raise of hands or nods or anything. So if we can maybe close that poll and move to the second question. There it is. And then this one really is now that we've talked about the geographic scope, this is really more about the size of your organization. The information germane to a 50 employee business in Washington is going to be different. Is going to be potentially different than a 4,000 employee outposts in 15 different countries. So that is what we're looking for with that information. So while we're doing that, I just wanted to, I guess, give a reset of where we're at. So this is SARS-CoV-2 or SARS-CoV-2. This is the virus that has caused all of this pain and that causes the disease that is known as COVID-19. We've learned a lot about it over the past 9 months since we learned about it. It's now thought to be spread almost entirely via respiratory droplets, less so with touching something, picking up what's called fomite transmission, picking up a bug off of a surface that you then touch your eyes. That seems to be less important, whereas the respiratory transmission is more important. So really what it is that's most risky now is being time in proximity with near other people, where you can breathe in their respiratory droplets and vice versa. Um, it can be spread when it's asymptomatic. It's more transmissible generally than the flu, the seasonal influenza, but it's less transmissible than measles. It seems like in addition to being in proximity to somebody when they are speaking or singing or shouting is a higher risk because you spray more, you spit more, to be perfectly honest. The other issue that you really want to think about when you're thinking about kind of risks is the ventilation. Apparently it is fairly, it doesn't transmit very well outside. And that, as far as I know, that is really thought to be the dilution is the solution to pollution mantra. That's to say, you spit out these respiratory droplets. Breeze comes up, mixes it with all the air, and there's not enough virus really in a concentrated place to pick it up. But and then last, it's starting to look more like a vascular disease as opposed to a respiratory disease. Apparently the newest research, as far as I can tell, is saying that the way it hurts you is it makes your vessels leaky. So for example, it's not really a respiratory issue so much as it's fluid getting through the linings of the lungs and filling the lungs with fluid that way. So it's a leaking, you're internally leaking as opposed to getting, like a pneumonia where you're getting bacteria into your lungs and it's causing problems from the inside of the lungs. It's coming from the other side. So there's the third question for the poll is hopefully going to come up here in a second.
And as we wait for that poll to come in, and you can go ahead and fill it out, one of the reasons we talk about the bug itself is because that really will color the way you respond internally at the job site, because it is respiratory, because it is transmitted through the air more so than surfaces. We'll be talking about some of the workers' compensation components to it and how to set up a safe workspace to try to reduce the spread at the job site.
Exactly right, John. And it's important as we're kind of thinking about how to reopen the business. If you've closed, how to reopen and bring people back is important to kind of know the disease and know the kind of things that we're looking to fight. Okay. Okay, so moving on to where we're at, again, I always like to kind of reset things. This, John had actually asked me to take this out. Sorry, John, but I love this. It is a picture from National Geographic of a lost tribe in the Amazon who has never had contact from outside people apparently until this picture. But I'm just thinking they know nothing about COVID or protests or anything. Just they're living our best lives right now. Okay, so this is a little bit of a chronology to kind of reset the table of where we're at. The important thing to know really is this, the difference here between the stay home, stay healthy order and the safe start plan. So the stay home, stay healthy was Governor Inslee's order that basically shut down the state. Everyone needed to stay home unless they needed to leave in order to pursue some essential activity. It banned all gatherings for social, spiritual, and recreational purposes, and closed businesses other than essential businesses. So that was back the end of March, and was in place until the beginning of June, with some, there were some loosenings and changes, and what was essential and what wasn't between March and June was changing, as you probably remember. June 1st, though, we got the Safe Start plan from Governor Inslee. It set up 4 separate phases that companies were to operate in. This is the picture is from the Washington State website. Goes through which phase each county is in. No one is in phase 4, which phase 4 is basically just reopened completely, no restrictions. Personally, I'd be surprised if anybody gets to phase 4 before, a vaccine or cure or however this resolves. I would be surprised if one county got to phase 4 much before the rest. Nobody is in regular phase 1. The 5 counties that are still in phase 1 are in a modified phase 1 to allow some limited openings. But the majority of the majority of the state is either in phase 2 or phase 3. Okay, so I did see most folks had either closed the office or had it just encouraged folks to work remotely. So that is where we're at. To the extent that folks want to return to work, there's multiple considerations. To first of all, deciding to reopen the office at all. There's multiple questions involved with that. I mean, can you work remotely efficiently? If your company can work remotely and service its clients remotely and meet its customers' needs, does reopening create risks that are unnecessary? I think companies like Twitter have decided that they're never going to require people to return to work. So that's a big thing. Another consideration is what your workspace is like. Are you in a big space where there's plenty of room for people to move around and to set up physical distancing, or is it a small place with old ventilation where that could create some problems? Another consideration is whether you own the building or somebody else, or you're renting from somebody else. My firm, for example, is in the Columbia Tower. So the Columbia Tower has their rules and regulations that we have to decide, if we can work with those, or if we would prefer to stay set down. And then, so even once you've decided, okay, we should reopen the office, then you need to decide, okay, who's returning to the office. And for most offices, there's going to be a limited occupancy, 50% or lower. There is going to be a requirement to have physical separation of 6 feet, or masks, and other requirements that we'll go through. So the question is, if you can only bring back 50%, who are those 50% you want to bring back? And then, I did want to ask Elaine, you guys have wrestled with this. So can you kind of
Yes.
walk through your True Blue experience?
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. I'd have to say that both these groups, the Washington Defense Trial Lawyers Association, as well as the Corporate Council, are near and dear to my heart. I spent 15 years as an insurance defense trial attorney for Zurich, and now I'm closing in on 4 years as in-house counsel for True Blue. So it's great to have this audience. I just want to say a shout out to maybe some former colleagues that are on here and my True Blue colleagues that are also in the audience. True Blue is in a unique situation in that we've never, and I say that because I see in the poll that only 9% of our audience answered that they never closed, and that was our situation as well. We are headquartered in Tacoma. Our office has about 300 to 500 employees at a time doing corporate support there. We also have a corporate support office in Chicago, Illinois, which was also a hard hit, which was also hard hit by COVID. And then we pretty much have a presence in every state in the United States and are also in Canada, international as well. So there are many layers to everything that, you know, we had to go through in this decision making of returning to work. Again, we never really closed because we are staffing. We are a part of this, we are in the staffing industry. And so we like to say that a lot of our workers, really a majority of them, were second responders. Our employees were out there, you know, delivering to warehouses, were helping out the manufacturers and getting things over to Amazon and you know, getting toilet paper over to Walmart. We were doing all of that stuff during this pandemic and also really instrumental in the remedial efforts of cleaning up buildings and schools, etc. And so, you know, as we wrestled with this, we had to also consider the issue of our joint employee relationship, our joint employer relationship with our customers, and making sure, you know, not only is our corporate building prepared to have people return back to work, but also on the operations side, looping in our safety team and making sure that where we're putting our workers at those sites, that they are also, those sites are also prepared and have a plan in place to make sure that our workers' safeties are first and foremost being protected. So, you know, with our corporate offices, starting in March, like really, I mean, I can't believe we've been in this for 6 months now. It feels like 6 years, I'm sure, for a lot of us here on this call. But with our corporate office, you know, traditionally we were really more of a button seat type of environment. Like we really like to go into the office. People, you know, it's nice to be able to walk down the hall and say hi to a colleague, and you know, all being lawyers here, right? It's good to get together in a conference room and talk about your case. But we really had to make a strong pivot to get our people to be working from home, looping in IT, making sure everyone had laptops if they didn't have laptops, or have things in place so that they can be efficient and productive at home. And then, you know, as of June 1st, when our governor tried to implement the Safe Start plan, is when we actually did come together, our COVID-19 response team, to put in together a welcome back plan for our office. And so with that, we have basically our principal right now, especially in Washington State, with most of the schools being still on virtual learning, and to kind of help a lot of our employees with having a balance, the struggle of childcare, as well as you know, being teachers, and then also their work life, is that True Blue has really said to its corporate employees that that as long as the schools remain virtual, we will also mostly remain virtual. So I think we're more on this slide as a hybrid model. We also have a lot of people who want to return back to work, who this has also been very difficult, right? Again, going back to balancing life, I think a lot of companies like TrueBlue, who are used to that traditional setting of having their employees come to the office rather than having more of these flexible work arrangements, now also see that there is a benefit to having their employees work from home, that people are actually sometimes even more productive and efficient at home because they don't have to deal with commuting to work, etc. And so there is like that, you know, cost benefit analysis too. And so with that, you know, with that not being able to separate work from home, a lot of employees are saying, look, I want that separation again. I want to return back to the office. And so, so we have really kept the office open. We really, with that, have not had more than maybe 15 to at most 20% of our workforce back at the corporate headquarters in Tacoma or and in Chicago. And a lot of the workers or a lot of our employees are still at work from home status.
Well, and I think that's an important point, Elaine. And thank you so much for making it. Because the important thing to remember is not only is returning to work, it's more than reopening the doors to the office, and it's more than reopening the doors to the office safely. At some level, you have to get your employee buy-in to actually want to return. So you get 20% of your workforce come back. Our office is reopened. I think there's about, I want to say there's probably 10 or 15% of lawyers who are actually going into the office. The rest of us continue to work remotely. So it's a two-way street. And which kind of brings us to the potential pitfalls. And there's a fourth poll that should pop up here in your screen in a second, which is going to ask you kind of what are the things that are keeping you up at night. Just wanted to let you know some of the pitfalls that I see and I've seen as we move through this. First, I mean, there's obviously going to be claims of discrimination in multiple ways. As an employment litigator, as mostly, that's where my head first goes. So you're going to have people claiming discrimination in how they were laid off. You're going to have people claiming discrimination on how they were brought back. And then the third way, you're going to have people alleging discrimination for under the ADA because they want an accommodation of working remotely. And I cannot tell you the number of employers that have told me in the past that that's just not possible. Well, start thinking now why it's not possible after the past 6 months when we've had folks working remotely. So, workers' compensation. As far as we know at this point, and you never know until a judge tells you, right? But as far as we know at this point, workers' compensation should cover any illness for employees who catch COVID at the office. But and there's a point that John made as we were talking about this earlier or late last week. What if a spouse or parent catches it from them? Is there potentially a negligence claim there? I think potentially there could be, which is why you need to make sure that we follow best practices in reopening, and be able to rely on the plan that we've put together. There's sick leave and sick leave, FMLA, and others that you need to keep in mind. One other thing to think about is what to do with outside employees or traveling employees. If you have employees who, have to travel to a sales meeting to Florida, do you invite them back into the office? Do you make them stay out for quarantine? I don't think there's any real legal guidance on that, but that's the question for you guys.
And Derek, I'd have to say, so one of the things with TrueBlue, and that's one of the things I think a lot of us companies are facing is, are there actually more pitfalls, right, with trying to return people back to work than there are to just keep them work from home until, after this pandemic is either eliminated or controlled in such a way. When we did our work from or return or welcome back to work plan back in June, the thought was we were going to be able to get on to, phase 3 and 4 fairly quickly back in June. And so that was when this welcome back to work plan was implemented. But, we haven't really made any changes to it since then. So it's still, the same plan that we had, but we haven't really implemented everything on it because, obviously things haven't progressed as quickly as we would have hoped when we had high hopes back in June. But when we're thinking about, okay, how can we get people to come back to work? I feel that when we talk about it internally, there seems to be a lot more risk to doing that than there are to just keep people at keeping people work from home because it's working right now, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. Exactly.
So I'm going to just mention one thing. So we have questions coming in or more comments about what keep people up at night with respect to COVID and returning to the office. The one thing I just wanted to put in everyone's mind as we progress through this slide is COVID has hit everyone, every industry, and included in that are lawyers. So when nobody's driving around on the roads and getting in automobile accidents, you have lawyers who don't have plaintiffs. So all of a sudden you have an abundance of lawyers with a lot of time on their hands. And what is the only game in town from an employment or from a litigation perspective? Employment claims, right? I mean, everybody is frustrated because they're either working from home and they don't want to, they're forced to go to the office, they don't want to. You can go down any rabbit hole you choose. And so the insight I would provide to you as we progress is, there are an abundance of plaintiffs' lawyers with way too much time on their hands who will be bringing claims against you and your employer for making employment-related decisions with respect to COVID. And to the best that you can, convince the decision makers in the company that the best risk management you can perform is to err on the side of absolute safety and caution. I mean, it makes your job so easy if you can go back with any response or any question brought to you on can we do this is what is in the most cautious approach to protect the employee. And one of the questions was asked about keeping people up at night about anxiety with some workers who refuse to wear a mask because they have a medical condition, a claimed medical condition. And so they get around wearing a mask and they might be exposing others in the workplace to potential COVID spread. Talk to your lawyer, but err on the side of protecting people. I think you would have a more righteous claim defending the workers who are complaining about a fear of a maskless coworker than an individual who's claiming that they're being discriminated against because they cannot wear their mask. At the end of the day, it's about protecting your workforce at large rather than the one person who's, in my opinion, in risk management, the one person who's trying to be nettlesome and getting around rules. So I'll turn it back over. That's my little piece for now.
Thanks, John, and I agree with you entirely. As far as somebody who's refusing to wear a mask because of a medical condition or a mental health condition, that would likely be covered by the WLAD and require an accommodation. But it does not require, like any accommodation, it doesn't require the accommodation that they ask for, right? Or that they demand. It doesn't need to be, well, I get to come to work without a mask on. Maybe it is unpaid leave. Maybe it is They get to work in an office, and if they need to walk to the bathroom, they can put a mask on. But that is the accommodation process that we would need to go through. And I did want to make one more point, kind of built on what John was saying, and I agree with him entirely, that there's going to be a ton of potential employment litigation coming out of this. But one thing I would say is that this really, in addition to providing a avenue for conflict with your employees, done right, this can actually deeply strengthen your relationship with your employees, because you can show them, hey, we care for your safety. We care about making widgets. Absolutely. And that's our number one thing. But in order to do that, you're the key person to do that. And we want you to be healthy, and we want you to feel comfortable. And so when you think about these things as communication pieces, in addition to setting down rules, you will want to make sure in those communication pieces that you are strengthening that relationship. So
one thing, Derek, just really quick. So the question about the mask wearing, this is what keeps lawyers employed. Every question is an individualized analysis. So don't take the fact that we say, yeah, you can force them to wear a mask walking to the bathroom as the solution. You really have to do that individualized analysis with the employee and see if there are other reasonable accommodations. So, that's where lawyers, unfortunately, are an important part of our economy. Is you come to us and ask us questions, and you pay us for an answer. So talk to your lawyers to solve those questions individually, but we just are trying to throw out basic principles.
Thank you, John. That's exactly right. But before you bring anybody back through the door of your office, you need to have a written plan. That is required by the law. It needs to be at least as strict as whatever the phase 2 requirements are, or whatever, as strict as the phase requirements, whatever phase that your county is in. And we provided I believe we sent everybody a copy of a sample one that you can adapt to your need. They can be smaller, they can be lengthier. I think the one that we sent was about 16 pages. There's areas in there where we talk about, inserting employee name, or go talk to this person or that person. And we'll talk about how you want to create programs or create teams to help with the COVID response, like I know Elaine did at True Blue. So as you're creating this plan, it's more than just a legal requirement. I mean, we all know legally required disclosures, but this really is more than that. I mean, it is that also, but it's also a tool to help you kind of think through the issues that coronavirus and COVID is going to present you with bringing people back together. It's also used to educate your employees about the virus, which is required by the law. But also, like I said, it's your communication tool to them about this is how much we care for you, and this is how we are. This is how we're taking care of it. Elaine, did you have any thoughts on how you guys went about developing your plan?
Yes, so we did make a plan. Again, it was in response to the Safe Start back in June. And I would say on top of the other reason, to always first and foremost keep your employees safe, is what John had brought up is we want to, as a business, want to mitigate our risk, right? So we are letting our employees know that these are the things that we're doing to help keep you safe while you're at the workplace. And so some things that we have instituted when you walk into we have our own office building in Tacoma, so we don't have to worry about any issues with the landlord or other tenants that are in a building, which you'd have to do if you shared that space. But we have basically two main entrances: our garage entrance and the main entrance on the floor on the street level. And we have a nifty little it takes your temperature, so it's basically, it looks like an iPad on a stick, and you just align yourself. It'll take your temperature. If your temperature is over 100.4, it'll let you know that you should leave the building. And we also have a short video there that's on loop that will basically give our guidelines about, making sure that you stay 6 feet away from each other, wear a mask. We have masks there at our disposable mask. And so we've had to think out, there's really minute details in terms of like changing floor plans, et cetera. So what you said, Derek, about, going through a plan and making sure that you have like key stakeholders. And when you're creating this kind of plan, like with our COVID-19 team, we have, our legal team is represented. We have supervisors basically from, all our different business lines, people in finance, people in IT, people in HR, people in safety. So you want to make sure you're getting all of those areas in, and you're sharing the same message throughout your business organization. And so this is not something that we did take lightly. It took a while. So thank you, Derek, for actually, I understand that this plan that you had put together is going to be offered to our attendees after this presentation. So that is really a heavy lift there. So thank you for sharing that. But our plan was 5 pages long. And it was just really a layout of how we are going to keep our employees safe once they are, back inside our office.
And, really, I mean, beyond the requirements of the law, you wanted to really address 3 things. One, how are you going to stop the virus from getting into your building? How are you going to prevent it from moving around if it does get in? And then last, when it does get in, how are you going to respond? So those are really the three main issues that you want to address in that plan. And I think Elaine said it right. You want to make sure that you have stakeholders. A lot of people will have different people from different areas of the company, either in different departments or different divisions, in order to address the things specifically for. Elaine said they have a building in Tacoma and a building in Chicago. Well, they're going to be different. The considerations of what's happening in Chicago is going to be different from what's happening in Tacoma. And so you want to make sure that you have people in place in both Chicago and Tacoma that can help provide input on the plan. So if it needs to diverge, you have that set. The other thing you want to consider, though, beyond just the bare bones of the plan, is you want to make sure that it fits in your overall communication strategy. And like I said, that it's helping to make people who are concerned about returning feel more comfortable with their safety if they do decide to come back to the office, or if you require them to come back to the office.
We have one question from the audience, and it's there's so much that's unknown about the virus and how it's spread. Best practices seem to change quickly, no doubt. Where do you recommend the best site for verifying best safety practices for employees and managers? It seems like the CDC changes its mind almost weekly on whether you can contract COVID from a surface or not. But the CDC is really the gold standard at the national level at giving guidance for employers. In Washington State, if you just Google LNI COVID-19, like WA LNI COVID-19, you get a coronavirus.wa.gov website, and there's a section there for guidance and resources for employers and business owners. So those are the 2 places I'd recommend to go to, because we will not be able to cover everything with the time that we have left. So keep going.
Thanks, Sean. And I also recommend to go to OSHA.gov. They have, to the extent that it is evolving, I think they have put out some guidelines and more guidelines now for like Oregon and Georgia, et cetera. So as they're catching up to things, I think OSHA.gov is really a good resource too.
And most importantly, your outside counsel is probably the best person to go to. No, honestly, I don't know if most, but many firms nowadays have a COVID-19 hub or portal on their website. I know we do, that you can go to, and to the extent we've written on something, it's there. But I think John and Elaine are right. If you follow guidance from the CDC and or the state health agencies and or the state occupational safety and health agencies, you're going to be pretty solid. If something happens to somebody, God forbid, you can at least have relied on good data. Okay, so the plan objectives is to protect, as it says, protect people. But you need to think more than just your employees, which are probably number one, but you also have customers, vendors, delivery people, friends and family who may come and visit, and then everybody that they live with. So you want, as you're creating that, you want to make sure that you've created a plan to protect each of those groups of people, and protect each of those groups of people from each other, right? So if a client comes into my office and I'm meeting with them for 5 hours in a meeting room and they have COVID, it doesn't matter that they were a customer and not an employee. So something to keep in mind. You want to make sure you're protecting your resources. You have closing costs, reopening costs. If you have to close again, it's gonna cost additional money. You have reputational problems. In Seattle, I think I saw quite a few people from Seattle, but there's a restaurant called Duke's here that was required to shut down because they had opened up. They had some lax COVID policies, and the state came in and made them shut down for 2 weeks, and it was quite a black eye. I know Amazon had some issues, especially early on, with how they were dealing with COVID in some of their warehouses. And then, of course, internal reputation from your employees and others. Okay, so and like John said, it's a novel virus, which means a year ago we knew nothing about it. So everything we learn is kind of new and subject to change, and it has. So you need to make sure that you have built into the plan or built into your processes a process for change, right? How are you going to, if there is a second wave, hopefully we've gone through the second wave, but if there's another second wave or a third wave or whatever it is, and we need to shut stuff back down, or we learn more about the virus and how it spreads, and we need to make changes, that we have that ready to go. Okay, so who to return to work? It's probably going to be limited initially. A lot of the types of work, as you're kind of thinking through, you want to think about the types of work that people are doing. Some stuff is going to be easier to do than others from home. Some stuff is going to be impossible. How much space you're going to have in your office. Can you get 6 feet apart? How to do it without discrimination. So what is the plan, especially if you have furloughed people? How are you bringing them back? Is it going to be, and whatever that process is, I'm going to want to see it written, and I'm going to want to see it be done as as much as possible on objective criteria. That way, when somebody says, "Oh, you didn't invite me back because I'm 46 years old," we can say, "No, you didn't get invited back because you didn't hit your productivity metrics for the last three quarters, and so that's why you're lower on the list."
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that is on the make a decision tree, and the first branch on that decision tree should be which positions need to come back, not which individuals need to come back. My recommendation is stay position specific and say these are the positions that need to come back. Then the second decision is who within this position needs to come back, and that is where you use that objective criteria. That is totally independent of whether the person is well liked, because you need that written down to defend against a claim later that you brought back Johnny because he's part of the old boys club. So which positions first, then the person within the position is the decision tree, and then document.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we do too over at True Blue. And it's really going back to what are the essential functions of that employee. I mean, like for payroll, right? They're printing out AP checks, so they're not able to work remotely. So obviously, people in finance or accounting may be the first people or the people that have not been able to go home at all. So it's really going back to the core. What is the, we've going back to the beginning of COVID when we were talking about essential and non-essential workers. It's the same thing for all our businesses is, who is essential to your business, who is essential in terms of having to do their core functions at an office as opposed to at home. There's some positions that you simply cannot have remote.
So the other thing, or another thing to think about, is the environment, right? So like I said, is it a big space, is it a small space? A lot of this and what you can do to make it better will depend on whether you own the building or you're renting. If you are, like I said, if you're renting from Columbia Tower, for example, you don't need to worry about, the front lobby and how that's laid out and that sort of thing. You may not have as much flexibility as far as moving tables around or creating offices, that sort of thing. That may be dealt with by your building. Also, you'll want to make sure that you have clued in with the building to determine what their plan is, so that your plan fits into like a jigsaw puzzle, or that they have taken adequate measures. If they didn't have any distancing measures, for example, in the lobby, I would be hesitant to bring anybody back because they would be put in an unsafe situation. Other things to think about, the HVAC system. You need good ventilation. How easy is it going to be to disinfect high-touch surfaces, conference rooms, that sort of thing. So we've talked about this a little bit. When we're creating the plan, we want, like I said, we want to organize by groups or areas or operations. You want to make sure that somebody's in charge of. You'll need somebody in charge of enacting the plan in Tacoma and Chicago. The person in Tacoma can't make sure that the people in Chicago are getting their temperature checked, or vice versa. So you want to make sure that you have a team in place in each area where it's necessary, and to be able to identify those people. You will want to have at least one person also have one person in charge to kind of be the liaison for questions. You want to go through and assess, what are the hazards and safety measures? What does get touched frequently? What doesn't get touched frequently? Can you make walkways one way? Can you require meetings by Zoom? Or are people going to require that they be done in person? I would never recommend that somebody have in-person meetings, but You know, these are all questions that you need to ask yourself. You, how to communicate it. And I know I've beaten this drum to death. But if there's one thing that I can have you take away on how to reopen the office, it is to communicate freely and expressively with your employees about what steps you are taking to keep them safe. It's going to help prevent bad feelings. It's going to prevent bad feelings, which leads to litigation, and it's going to prevent people from being scared or concerned about coming back to work, which is going to impact their coming back to work and then their productivity once they're there. And then last is to validate. And what that means is follow the plan. And if the plan isn't working or it's not being followed, change it. What I'm going to see, and I don't want to see, but I'm going to see at some point, is somebody saying, oh yeah, no, that was our plan, but this is what we were doing. And I'll tell you that opposing counsel or plaintiff's counsel is going to hold you to that plan, as are your employees. So if a plan isn't working or it's not meeting your needs, it can be changed, but you want to do that in a thorough process. Okay, so here's kind of the elements that you want to look at. Physical distancing. I think that it's becoming clear that that is probably the most important thing. Working remotely is the easiest way to promote physical distancing. But if that can't be done, you need to make sure that spaces are set up where there's 6 feet of space, which is easy enough to do when you think about it in a desk. Desks, set those up 6 feet apart. More difficult when you're talking about common areas. So elevators, lobbies, hallways, break rooms, bathrooms, bullpens. If you have an area where you have a bunch of desks all in the same room, arrival times. Having 500 employees all show up within 30 minutes of each other, it's going to be real hard to keep them 6 feet apart. So maybe you stagger breaks and arrival times and departure times, so that you have, a third of the people arriving every 30 minutes, just to cut down on that point there. You'll need to provide masks at the entry for all employees, hand sanitizer at the entry and throughout the office, basically anywhere where there's going to be a high touch area. You'll want a little thing of hand sanitizer out there, as well as cleaning items, and then of course signage, telling the employees where they can find these things, not to get in the elevator with other people. Here's how the arrows on the that they use at the grocery store on the floor. Those are great, and that way everybody goes in one direction, and it's easier to. There's no passing briefly in the hallway.
So just looking at the time, we have a hard stop at 4:10. We may go for a few more moments to try to get through some of the materials. If anybody needs to drop off, the plan, the mock plan that Derek drafted will be circulated. And if you want to walk away with something, just think of the most restrictive place you have been, where they take your temperature, they ask a bunch of questions. If it's good enough to get into your favorite store at the mall, like you shouldn't do anything less than that with respect to trying to reintegrate your own employees back to work. So Derek and Elaine, keep trucking along, but we will have a hard stop at 4:10.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and I think we're almost done, but I did want to go through quickly the medical screening, which is required before you let people into your property. And Elaine talked about it, I think, what they're doing at True Blue with the iPad that they have, scan people, and it'll tell you if they have a fever or not. I think we use a handheld, like forehead thermometer. That the only thing it says is whether you have a temperature or not. I don't think it actually even gives you what the temperature is. People can take their temperature at home and tell you what it is, but that is the best thing. Make sure that you take somebody's temperature or that their temperature is taken. You go through the self-assessment with them. If they feel any symptoms, they got to go. If they have a fever, they have to go home and wait it out. If you do have an employee that had a temperature, they get tested, and it turns out that they have COVID, you'll want to, well, a couple of things with that employee. First of all, they don't get to return to work for at least 10 days. And you can make that longer if you want, but at least 10 days since the symptoms start, and 24 hours have passed without a fever, without medication, right? So, and then last, that you have no other symptoms, right? So it's 10 days from the start of symptoms. If the symptoms have resolved and you haven't had a fever within the past 24 hours. Like I said, you can require more. You can require a clean test. You can require 2 weeks of quarantine, etc. For your other employees, you want to encourage everybody to get tested. Let them know that there was a positive COVID test. You don't need to tell everybody who it was necessarily, but you will want to encourage everybody to get tested. But you do want to let any employee or vendor who was near that person know.
Yeah, I would just interject and say you cannot tell people who tested positive. Everyone, might deduce who it was, but that's, being treated as protected health information. And so you don't want to say John Doe tested positive, you should too. They might deduce that it was John Doe when you say somebody in your department tested positive, but you don't want to be the one to disclose who that person was.
Exactly right. Thanks, John. Okay, and then the other thing that's important to know is if you've had 2 employees test positive within 14 days, you need to alert the local health department as quickly as possible. And they may come in and do some deeper audit to make sure that there's no other spread in your workplace. But that is mandatory. All right, face covers. We talked a little bit about somebody who presents with a medical condition that they said prohibits it. Okay, and I think this is the last thing. So again, we talked about the COVID-19 team. A couple of other things to think about is Elaine alluded to this, your vendors and customers or whoever's going to come into contact with your employees, or your employees are going to come in contact with them, make sure that they have a good plan in place. And if they don't, you can provide them help. Say, hey, here's some things that we could think if that works for you. But if it is wildly out of line with yours and exposes your employees to danger, that could be a problem. You want to regularly check in with the COVID team, see how things are going, and maintain your flexibility. For the past several weeks, it's been more or less stable is the wrong word, but there haven't been a whole bunch of changes. But you'll still want to check in with your COVID team, make sure that everything is working as it should, make sure they're still following the plans. And if not, how the plans need to be changed, et cetera. And then the last thing is really the part I think that gets overlooked with all the COVID and coronavirus stuff. If nobody's been in your office since March, like nobody had been in my office since March, there's going to be a lot of other things that are needed to do. It's like opening a second house or something, right? You need to make sure that run the water, make sure it's clear. If there's drinking water, make sure that it's clear of the pipes, the HVAC system is up and working, all of the plants are watered, etc. So always remember those things as you're getting back started.
We had one question, so we have 3 minutes before literally we get cut off, whether we want to continue talking or not. We have a question from the audience, and the question was, may we disclose the identity of an individual who tested positive if they authorize it? I would say yes, if someone authorizes it, you can, but you better document the fact that they authorized it, because people get short memories quickly when they want to bring a lawsuit. The other thing I'll say generally about employment claims is employment claims are usually being built long before you know it. So if you have a lackluster station for testing people before they enter the building, they're probably taking photos and sending them to their lawyer. So, unfortunately, you just don't know that it's there until it bites you. So that's why planning is very important, and documenting is important, because you better believe they're documenting the things that they want to document that help their case. We have 2 minutes left. Elaine, Derek, anything else you'd like to say before we close out?
No, I would just like to say on top of the work on the return to work is, if you're going to implement a practice and policy, allow yourself to allow some flexibility within that, right? Because this is very fluid. So also put in language in there saying that, this may be modified, relaxed, or reinstated, or expanded, or whatever it is, to allow you some flexibility. As John said, people are creating their cases, so you want to allow some room there for you as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And like I said, I know there's a lot of information, and literally there are regulations and guidance being provided, I think, by every entity that I'm aware of. I don't know if the CIA has put something out yet, but I'm sure it's coming next. So if there's anything specific that I can answer, I'm happy to. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help in any way I can, and looking forward to getting all of this behind us.
Well, thanks everyone for attending. Please register for our Managing Workers at Home in 2 weeks. Have a fantastic day, mask up, and stay healthy.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.